This is a complete waste of money. At least that's what I thought to myself when I decided to get this monitor. After all, I already had a 4K 144Hz IPS gaming monitor from Dell, and how much better the new 240Hz OLED from MSI can be. But after just over 1 week with it, I am happy to say I was completely wrong. And in today's video, I'll tell you what I love about the 321URX from MSI and also what could be done better. The monitor comes in a pretty large and heavy box, large enough that I had a lot of difficulties fitting it into my car's trunk. So if you decide to pick one for yourself directly from the store, do make sure it will fit inside. Oh, and by the way, there's a link to this monitor down in the video description. The box is pretty sturdy and protects the monitor well enough. It's also quite easy to carry using the side handles. The whole box weighs just over 12 kilos. Inside you will find stand base, which is pretty compact taking into consideration the monitor size, but that's a good thing since it won't take up too much space on your desk. There's also the mounting arm which you attach to the monitor, which allows you to tilt, swivel and pivot the monitor to adjust it to your preference. Due to the size of the monitor, you cannot rotate it to portrait mode. We also get a power cable, HDMI and DisplayPort cable and USB cable to connect the monitor to your PC. The assembly is pretty simple. Just remember to open the box towards you, something I didn't do, and had to rotate the whole box afterwards. First you need to attach the stand to the arm with a bottom screw, no special tools needed. Then you can attach the arm to the screen itself with the snap-in mechanism, very similar to what most monitors use these days. After the arm snaps into place, you can easily take out the whole thing and put it directly on your desk. There's no need to take out the display on its own, and I would also advise against that to prevent any accidental damage. The build quality of the new 4K 240Hz gaming monitor from MSI is really good. The back of the monitor with its perforated top, sharp edges and carbon fiber accents reminds me of sports cars, and it's really nice to look at. At the back there's also a subtle RGB accent displaying MSI logo. Of course you won't see much of that after you've assembled the monitor, as you'll mostly be admiring the OLED goodness at the front. But before we go to the image quality, let's finish up the build and features. At the bottom part of the monitor there's quite a few ports to choose from. You get a standard set of ports, one DisplayPort 1.4a, two HDMI 2.1 and a USB-C port with 90 watts power delivery. Great way to connect your laptop or other mobile device without having to run a separate display cable to it. There's also a power inlet, two USB Type-A ports, one USB Type-B port that can drive signal to your PC, and a headphone output. All of the cables can be routed through the cutout in the monitor arm. The only downside here is that if you decide to pull the screen higher than the lowest setting, you will see the cables going out the back. Right, now let's move on to the screen itself. I was really skeptic when it comes to the coating of the monitor. It's glossy with anti-reflective coating, and I was expecting to see a ton of reflections which would come from the window which I have behind my back when I sit in front of the desk. But the reflections are handled really well. I would even go so far to say that the MSI's glossy coating does a much better job at dealing with them than the matte coating on the Dell G3223Q. On the latter, whenever there was a bit more light coming through the window, I just saw a milky white spot where the light was hitting the monitor. It was really irritating, like having a kind of a fog on top of your display obscuring the image behind it. On the glossy finish, yes, there are some reflections, but they aren't as big of a distraction as on the matte one. Maybe because they're more contained and the monitor is quite far away from the window, the main source of light in my room. Of course, when gaming at night, this problem disappears. However, I need to point out something other reviewers also mention and can be a bit of a disappointment when you use the monitor in bright conditions, the blacks. Just as everyone is saying, when you have a lot of light hitting the monitor, the blacks get a bit of a grayish purple tint and aren't true blacks. You can easily see this on the screen right now. And just to be completely clear, this will only be visible when there's a lot of light hitting your monitor or surface, and will only be obvious when the screen is mostly black. In everyday use, you will not notice it as much. And this leads me to my biggest oh wow moments when I turn on this monitor, the blacks and the colors. It's really difficult to show on screen, but the deep blacks and rich, vibrant colors that pop off the monitor smoke the G3223Q out of the water. It's not even close when it comes to image quality competition. When I launched Modern Warfare after plugging in the OLED, it was like playing a completely different game, a better version of the game I play in my free time. The contrasts are amazing, the blacks are deep, and the HDR performance is also amazing. I'm sure it's not the first time you hear this opinion, but let me tell you, it's not a marketing gimmick. The difference between OLED and any other display is night and day. The image clarity, thanks to 240Hz refresh rate and ultra low response times from OLED panels makes this monitor a great choice for competitive gaming as well. It's also something I did notice while playing the game for the first time. The motion was clearer, much less blurry, and allowed me to track moving targets much more easily. Here's a comparison between the Dell and MSI monitor from Motion Busters, and I think you can see clearly that the image from the OLED panel is much clearer. When it comes to text rendition, it's pretty good, definitely not as good as IPS screen, which has different subpixel layout, but the latest improvements and 4K resolution, you really need to look closely to see any difference, especially when looking from a healthy distance. Then there's almost no difference when it comes to text quality. The brightness of the monitor is good enough. My room maybe isn't the brightest out there as I don't have any direct sunlight getting into it, but even on a sunny day it gets pretty bright. And even then I don't see the need to increase the brightness of the monitor above 50%, meaning even in a fairly well-lit room this monitor should hold its own. Another thing worth talking about is the OLED care features from MSI. There's quite a few of them, you can see them on the screen right now, and let's hope they do the job well. If not, there's also the 3-year burn-in warranty to help you play with ease of mind. I'm not saying work, as honestly I do not think it's advisable to use the OLEDs for extended productivity work, especially with a lot of static content on the screen. And if you want to use this monitor for any type of color work, whether it's design, photo or video editing, the calibration and color range is really impressive. It covers 99% of DCI-P3, 97% of Adobe RGB with 10-bit color depth. The sRGB calibration, which I already tested while editing some photos, is great and good enough for semi-professional work that I do. The skin tones, blacks and whites are rendered really well. The monitor also has a lot of additional features like KVM, which allows you to use the same mouse and keyboard for multiple devices, some game enhancing features which raise the shadows or change the color of the scope on the screen when it could blend with the background, and so on. The only thing I'm not a fan of is the fact that even though the monitor is marketed as frameless, there is still a bit of a framing going on around on the edges. And the frames aren't exactly small either, but at this size they do not get in the way that much. Oh, and there's also some spare pixels around for the pixel shift function, which can be visible if you look closely at the edges. Again, something you will maybe notice on day one, but as soon as you start using the monitor you will forget they even exist. Taking into account all of the above, I really do think that this monitor with 240Hz refresh rate, 4K resolution, very good text rendition, magnificent color and HDR performance and accurate calibration can be the dual monitor, and for me it's definitely going to be just that. If you're on the market for a monitor that can serve you for the next couple of years and offers great performance, the MSI 321URX is, in my opinion, one of the best choices out there at this moment.